The very best team that I ever had was a complete nightmare to lead. 3 of the executives who reported to me were incredibly intelligent, gifted humans, and they were all extremely ambitious. And all 3 of them had deep expertise in the black art of energy trading. But of course, I only had one who was accountable for trading. The other 2 were the chief financial officer and the head of strategy. But they all wanted to be involved because trading was the lifeblood of this business. It drove the profitability. It drove the performance of this company. And they all had something to contribute. They were all really headstrong. And so if I got 3 of them in a room and asked them for their thoughts on something, I'd get at least 4 different opinions. And all of them suffered in some way, shape or form from this thing that I call often wrong, never in doubt. Now, to complicate matters, this was my first job in the energy sector. I'd never worked in energy before. So when they went down on a tangent, to me, it sounded like they were speaking Swahili. But this led me to a revelation. Because I didn't understand what was going on, I had to let all of these conversations go through to their natural conclusion. And what this meant was that we had to cross that line where we'd normally pull back from a conversation, when things would get heated, when the room temperature would rise and conflict would escalate. And we had to keep going through it. I couldn't say, 10 deep breaths, cool your jets, let's step back from this. We had to go all the way through. And sometimes it got personal. Tempers frayed and I'd have to jump in. And when they couldn't play nicely in the sandpit, sometimes they just get a timeout, right? Other times, I'd convince them to kiss and make up. But more often than not, it was just a matter of reminding them that we were all on the same team and we were all there to do exactly the same thing. We were after the same outcomes. And what I noticed was that we started to get really good at this. We started to get really good at understanding each other, at using the tension that we'd created to pressure test our ideas. We listened to each other better, and the outcomes were phenomenal. Now, when I realised this, it hit me like a pie in the face. All of the value that was to be gained from this team came after the point where we wanted to stop. And when I found this out, I started to take it into other areas of my life, outside of the work environment. And I noticed that all my relationships started to flourish. My second marriage is going better. Now, conventional wisdom tells us that we need to avoid conflict. But the trouble with conventional wisdom is that even though there's always some grain of truth to it, it's easy to misinterpret, it's really easy to oversimplify, and it's easy to rationalise. And nowhere do we lean on conventional wisdom more than in the realm of leadership. We believe things on face value just because they sound like they should be true. So we're told that all great leaders are humble. Okay, that's probably true. But not all humble leaders are great. That's a completely different thing. People who've worked for me before have asked me, should I be more humble? And the answer's always the same. I don't know. Maybe. It depends what else is going on. If you're humble and you're decisive, well, that's incredibly powerful. But if you're humble and you're indecisive, it's disastrous. Okay, here's one. We're told that we need to put people before profits. Come on, Marty, that's got to be true, doesn't it? Only the most battle-hardened capitalist would argue that point. Well, at the risk of exposing myself, the first question that comes to my mind is, which people are we talking about? Now, I know that statement is designed for employees, and that's fine. But employees are one group in this complex ecosystem of business. And so I think about other people. How about the customers? What about those people? If I focus on keeping my employees happy and I allow them to become unproductive or complacent or even, dare I say it, entitled, the customer is going to pay more. How about those people? How about the communities we operate in? How about those people? If I can't make sufficient profits in the company, I'm going to start to cut corners. And you do not need to be a Harvard Business School professor to know where those corners are going to get cut. Let's start with our environmental obligations. So how about the communities we operate in? How about those people? And then, of course, we're told that collaboration is everything. That we need to create a culture where people collaborate together and create value and innovation for themselves and for the organisation. That's probably true. But so many leaders take this and allow it to degrade into consensus. Now, we think consensus is a good thing. But in my book, it's absolutely not. And I've seen this happen over and over and over again. When we seek consensus, a couple of really interesting things happen. The first is we stop talking about the merits of any viewpoint and we start thinking about the popularity of that viewpoint. We stop trying to solve the problem and start trying to satisfy the people. And a decision that's made on a consensus basis, it just pushes you down to the lowest common denominator. And so I have sat through hours and hours and hours of soul-destroying appeasement to try and arrive at an answer that everyone is happy with. So I hope you think more about conventional wisdom. How do we harness the power of this constructive conflict, though? Well, in my view, there are three critical steps we need to take. The first is we need to be able to sit comfortably in a conflict situation. Now, if you say that fast enough, it sounds really easy. It's the hardest thing in the world to do. To remain calm and rational and relaxed and to not escalate when things start to get tough, but to willingly sit in that conflict because that's where the value lies. The second step is to remain curious. Now, when someone disagrees with you, what's your natural reaction? Defensiveness. You're wrong. I know you're wrong. In a minute, I'm going to tell you why you're wrong if you'll just stop talking. Right? What if we were to remain curious instead of that? What if we thought, as our initial reaction, I wonder why they think that? Maybe I've missed something. Perhaps that assumption I made isn't actually correct. And that takes us to a completely different place, and it changes the entire tone of the interaction. The third step is to have strong, single-point accountability for making decisions. It's critical that we know who is going to make that final call. And when we all get together to have that discussion, that's fine. In my team, I had one accountable person. That was the head of energy markets. He was going to make that call. So what me and the others thought, well, it was fun and interesting, but it was completely irrelevant. Because I had that one person who I knew was accountable for getting that right. If I'd waited for consensus, at this moment, you would be looking at some pretty stained glass windows. I'd still be in Australia, sitting in my office waiting for that to happen, because it never would have. There's just one thing that nags at me in the back of my head. How can I be promoting more conflict? Doesn't the world already have enough? If we use conflict to divide people and we don't have compassion for each other, that's when it all goes wrong. The two things that turn conflict into a constructive conflict are respect and empathy. And if we have respect and empathy for the person on the other side of the table, it doesn't create more division, it creates understanding and it creates tolerance. So this team was a great team and we posted some unbelievable results. The way we were able to run this company was exponentially better than anything I had ever seen before. But what about the people? Because that does matter. Now, the older I get, the less certain I am about practically everything. But there's one thing I'm pretty convinced about. All self-esteem comes from achieving difficult things. Period. That's it. And when I looked at what this process did to the people on my team, to look at each other and know that we're on a winning team that was doing something really different, that was a self-esteem boost that I've never seen people get before. And once I understood the power of that, we looked at each other and we knew that we'd achieved something very rare and special. Thank you.